friends, it's Ms Erin from the University City Public Library, here to share another silly story with you. And today we're going to hear all about Mr. Watson's chickens. Mr. Watson lived with Mr. Nelson in a big honkin' house with a teeny tiny yard in a big honkin' city. And in that teeny tiny yard, he kept 2 dogs, 3 cats, and a handful of chickens. Mr. Watson loved his chickens, and his chickens loved him. He started, like any sensible person, with 3. And every morning, he and Mr. Nelson would count them. 1, 2, 3. But soon, Mr. Watson's chicken collection grew. Do you see the babies? And grew. Even more babies. And grew. Before they knew it, Mr. Watson had 456 chickens. Their house was teeming with birds. See here, I see a chicken pillow fight. I see chickens flying kites. Chickens trying to cook, and even a chicken puppet show. Chickens in the sink, chickens on the bed, chickens in the bread box, chickens on their heads. There were even chickens in the bathtub. Oh, and the noise. The house shook with it. Aunt Agnes, this big old chicken here, made up her own song. Shoo-be-doo, walk-a-pow, baka-baka in the chow-chow. And she sang it all the time. Still, Mr. Nelson loved to cook eggs for Mr. Watson, and so he was happy with this arrangement, until he found 4 chickens in his brand new boots. Mr. Watson, these chickens are becoming a problem, cried Mr. Nelson. You're right, Mr. Watson said, and he sat down to think of what to do. The next day, Mr. Nelson found feathers in his hair gel. Mr. Watson, cried Mr. Nelson, these chickens are a problem. You're right, Mr. Watson said, and he sat down to think of what to do. Late that night, Aunt Agnes led the other chickens in a full choral rendition of her favorite song. Shoo-be-doo, walk-a-pow, baka-waka in the chow-chow. It was too much. Mr. Watson, Mr. Nelson cried. These chickens are more than a problem. If you don't get rid of them, I'm moving to the coop out back to be alone. Mr. Watson loved his chickens, but he loved Mr. Nelson more. Without Mr. Nelson, his heart would have been a broken egg. So the next day, the 2 men gathered up the chickens in cages, boxes, and crates. They loaded them onto wagons all tied together in line and set off for the county fair to find the chickens' loving homes. That's a whole lot of chickens. But just as they reached their destination, Mr. Watson tripped. All the chickens were gone. No, Mr. Watson wailed. How will we find them all? Now the whole city would be littered with chickens. Sure enough, whose chickens are these? The pickle slinger cried. 10 chickens bobbed in her tubs. That'll be me, said Mr. Watson with a 1, 2, 3 as he moseyed over to collect his chickens. Whose chickens are these? The cheesemonger cried. 20 chickens were feathered deep in their cheese. That'll be me, said Mr. Watson with a 1, 2, 3 as he sidled over to collect up his chickens. Whose chickens are these? The nuthawker howled. 30 chickens waited in his bins. That'll be me, whispered Mr. Watson with a 1, 2, 3 as he skulked over to collect up his chickens. At long last, Mr. Watson and Mr. Nelson collected every single chicken, except one. Where was the final chicken? Do you see them? Oh my goodness. They're gonna have to go find a chicken and all that? Shooby-doo, walkie-pow, bark-a-barky in the chow-chow. The other chickens joined Aunt Agnes. Shooby-doo, walkie-pow, bark-a-barky in the chow-chow. The crowd went wild. They'd never heard such a beautiful song. Just then, an official-looking lady yelled, "Quiet! Those chicks still up for adoption, Bob?" she asked. "I'll take 'em all." "All?" gasped Mr. Watson. "All. I've been looking for a new act for the fair. A big honkin' chicken choir is just what I needed." "Done!" cried Mr. Watson. That night, Mr. Watson and Mr. Nelson ate supper, and there were no chickens in their soup. They brushed their teeth, and there were no chickens in the sink. They got ready for bed, and there were no chickens in their pajamas. But Mr. Watson felt sad without his chickens, and Mr. Nelson did too. Now their house was an empty nest. Or was it? Crack, crack, crack. Shooby-doo, walkie-pow, bugga-bugga in the chow-chow. It begins again. 1, 2, 3. You think they'll be able to keep it to just 3 chickens this time? I hope so. There's only so many chicken choirs that we need in the world. I really hope you liked my silly story about chickens, friends, and I'll see you next time. Bye.